Hello, everybody. This is NC Bipindra. I'm a journalist based in Delhi. Welcome, all of you. And this is a discussion on Jammu and Kashmir, the latest developments there. And I have a very important and an interesting uh, personality to discuss this issue with me today. Just to give you a background of the subject, on June 24th, Prime Minister Narendra Modi led a government interaction with political leaders from Jammu and Kashmir. This interaction came 2 years since the Modi government scrapped the Article 370 and also made Jammu and Kashmir a union territory. It also separated Ladakh into a separate union territory. And since then, some of the political leaders in Jammu and Kashmir were kept behind house arrest. Some of them were detained. After they were released during the Corona period, this interaction has happened, and Prime Minister Modi made some very significant remarks when he spoke with the leaders of Jammu and Kashmir, political leaders of Jammu and Kashmir. This was regarding the democratic process in the Union Territory there, and also in the context of establishing an assembly, a new assembly for the Union Territory. This assembly would be just like a Delhi and Pondicherry, which are union territories with assemblies. The significance of the meeting is that the two-year lull, after a 2-year lull, Jammu and Kashmir got some interesting political developments. There are also some developments with regard to terror activities that have happened in the recent times, just a couple of days ago. We are going to be discussing all this. During this interaction, Prime Minister indicated to the political leaders that the delimitation process will have to be completed at the earliest and the polls held soon, so that a new political leadership emerges in the state. And he also hoped that the youth of the state would ensure that a new leadership emerges in the state. This is quite an interesting point that Prime Minister has made. We'll be discussing that. And we'll also be discussing issues such as the recent terror attack using a drone on the Jammu Air Base. This has created quite a stir among the national security establishment. The significance is that this is the first ever drone based terror attack that has happened in India on any installation, particularly military installation. The attack happened on the Jammu Air Base. That is where the significance lies. And to discuss all these issues, we have Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain. He's a great thinker and a military mind. He served in the Indian Army for nearly 4 decades. He was the commander of the 15 Corps based in Srinagar, which handled both internal security and the external threat from Pakistan on the western borders. He has in-depth knowledge about Kashmir, and during his tenure, he did a lot of interesting and an innovative approach to national security, which is appreciated by the Awam of Kashmir. He is still remembered despite he hung his boots quite a while ago. Since his retirement, he has been appointed as the Chancellor of the Central University of Kashmir. And in his last posting, he was the military secretary in the Indian Army. Welcome, Lieutenant General Atta Hasnain, to this interesting conversation that we will be having. And I'm a great admirer of your writing and your presentations that you make in several programs. So
Thank you so much.
I'm expecting that this conversation is going to be as interesting as all those.
I'm sure. Given the depth of your knowledge also on the subject, I have no doubt, Bipindra Saab, we are going to have a very good discussion.
Thank you so much, sir. Let me just start with this first question that comes to my mind, which is that this interaction has happened after a 2-year lull in the political activity in the state, and this has kind of thrown up a lot of interest among watchers because the democratic process is likely to happen pretty soon. What are your first impressions about this Prime Minister's meeting, and what do you think led to this kind of a conversation for the government to have with the political leadership in Jammu and Kashmir?
See, Bipindra Saab, there are two dimensions to it. One, there's an external dimension, and one, there's an internal dimension. Let me talk about the internal first. After the landmark decisions which were taken on the 5th of August 2015, we obviously had to wait out for some time. Time would be a great healer. And we realized at that time, the government also realized that for some time a stabilization process will probably take place. Unfortunately, 4 months down down the line after August, the government moved to Jammu, the state government, or that time the Union Territory government moved to Jammu. Thereafter came the COVID, and we've been with COVID since then. So there's not been too much time to carry out political activity, which is one of the very, very important aspects of ensuring stabilization. What we have been able to achieve is a tremendous amount of stabilization on the internal security front. That is, the LOC is silent at the moment with the ceasefire agreement with Pakistan. Infiltration is extremely low, almost zero at the moment. And the internal turbulence in the streets of Kashmir, etc., is also at a very low. Terrorist activities are generally subdued. Last few days, we've had a little bit of an eruption, but this doesn't really make too much of a difference. So, given all this, we are now almost 2 years down the line. And that's 2 years after the last elections also. So there's something that the government of India has to now take some initiative to try and ensure that a political process starts in Kashmir. Because at the end of the day, whatever kind of an internal situation, security situation you have been able to resolve, you have been able to stabilize until the political aspects are not clear. Until there's a political color to all your initiatives, solutions are not going to emerge. So that is a very important aspect, and the initiative was taken by the government of India based on that. Number two is the external dimension. This seems to me to be the ideal time. Because of the pressure perhaps of the regional security environment and the changing international environment. You know, the whole world is looking after the pandemic. We are still in the pandemic, of course, but in the process of looking post-pandemic, are looking at a reset in the global order. And the most important event is happening right next to us in Afghanistan, where the US is withdrawing all its troops after 20 years of occupation there. That is going to have a tremendous effect in the whole Middle East, in the entire South Asian region. So, keeping all this aspect in mind, Pakistan is extremely involved there at the moment. It's one of the frontline states, very important. Because of that, this area, our area, is comparatively subdued. Of course, then when you question me subsequently on the terrorist activities, I will have something a little more different to say at that time. But at the moment, the initiative was definitely taken with the aspect in mind that we've got stability in Kashmir. We have tried out the District Development Council elections. We have had a level of democratic activity there. More political color needs to be added to it, and this needs to be done in a bit of a hurry so that we can meet some kind of a deadline for the assembly elections, before which the delimitation activity has to be carried out. Yes. You're muted. You're muted.
Yes. General Astain, you actually gave an interesting background of why this, talks happened, why this initiation of a dialogue happened between the political leadership there. But considering the voices that emerged post that particular dialogue that the Prime Minister had, with regard to restoration of Article 370 or asking for the statehood, what do you think this interaction was worthwhile? Because the stand of the political leadership, despite that 2 year, whatever happened in Kashmir in terms of maintaining peace there, hasn't kind of percolated down to the political leadership there in the state.
Vipin, this is a very interesting question, there's no doubt. As I said, I made a very important statement in my initial opening remarks, and that is, time is a great healer. And whether it comes to politics, whether it comes to external environment, time is a great healer. The initial response which was there in Kashmir from the leadership was extremely negative. Everyone was used to 70 years of Article 370 and things like that. Everyone was used to having the special status. The people were all used to it. They couldn't imagine a Jammu and Kashmir without Article 370, without 35A. This had somehow seeped into the psyche, the thinking of the people and the leadership. Give it time, and you realize that with all the other initiatives which are taking place, Jammu and Kashmir need not have special status, but it could definitely have a lot of special provisions. It could be integrated fully into the Indian system and perhaps draw more benefits from it. And that's exactly what is happening. Now, the incarceration of some of the political leaders was unfortunate, but in the wisdom of things at that time, people did perceive that there would be some disturbances and they did not want to upset the entire apple cart after having taken such a landmark decision. So these decisions to incarcerate people were taken. Now all that is behind us. And I give it to the maturity of the Indian democratic system. I give it to the maturity of the Indian government that they have forgotten all this. They have brought everyone forward again. They're willing to forget the past and to make a fresh beginning for it. And to the credit of the mainstream political leaders of Jammu and Kashmir also, they too were willing to join in. 14 of them were invited and all 14 came for the meeting and have not made any particularly negative statements based thereafter, which means that the meeting was held in a reasonably good environment and that there is fair amount of room for maneuver, because without that room for maneuver, nothing is going to emerge.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there was cordiality between the government side, the central government side, and the political leadership during that conversation that happened. But the leadership itself that were invited, some people say that they had been quite discredited in the state. And the Prime Minister also made a very interesting remark of the youth, emerging as a new leadership in the state in the future, as and when the elections are held. Do you really think that it is time for Jammu and Kashmir to throw up a new, political leadership there, considering the kind of changes that are happening in the state, the kind of work that the central government is doing, and the kind of atmosphere that has been generated in the state in the last 2 years, the kind of peace that is kind of emerging there?
Yes, very, very interesting. And from an idealistic point of view, all this is absolutely necessary. You see, when you got Purane Khayalat, as you think, the old ideology, the old thinking, that will stick to all this business of Article 370 and things like that. To make a really good new beginning, you do need people with a fresh mind. And that's the new generation. Unfortunately, Kashmir does not have too much of a positive young generation, youth generation of the new generation as such at the moment, because for the last 30 years, almost 2 generations have gone through only conflict. You have only seen the jackboot, you've only seen the people on the streets with uniforms and things like that. It's been a reasonably abnormal kind of an upbringing for many of the people who were born in 88, 89, 90. So therefore, to overnight create a new youth, to create a new leadership is a challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible, it is a challenge. I have been in Kashmir recently. I have found a lot of people, very enthusiastic young people. Many of them are on social media. They're in interaction with me. They are all ambitious. They are all looking for good things for Kashmir. But this will take time. This will take time. And here the unfortunate thing is that everything is in a fast process at the moment. With the international environment, the regional environment, this window which is available at the moment, I think the government of India is making the right decision to exploit this window. But in the hurry, we may make mistakes. We could possibly make mistakes. And I am of the opinion that in this short period, to develop a very capable and very reliable young leadership may become extremely difficult. Also remembering the fact that when the District Development Council elections took place, if you remember, it is all the same parties and the same leadership which participated. And you had a reasonably good turnout. And to their credit, many of these parties have come out winners in Kashmir in many, many areas. So I think there's this bit of a problem mismatch of the old versus the young is going to be one of the biggest challenges in the emergence of the new Kashmir, Naya Kashmir, which is what the Prime Minister talks about.
Yes, absolutely. You made this very interesting point about how the participation in the election process, the democratic process in Jammu and Kashmir has been quite encouraging in the last 2 years with all these local body polls that have happened.
Yes.
The number of voters have come out and they've cast their vote, they've elected their local body leaders. But interestingly, what has happened is that most of these leaders are coming under the target of forces that are inimical to India at this point in time. So we have heard about, we have seen what has happened to some of the leaders who got elected. They were either attacked and got injured, or some of them have been killed. But if this kind of a trend continues, do you think more people will be encouraged to come and participate in elections, whether it is local body or the state, or even the parliamentary polls in the times to come? And do you think that this has been done to kind of terrorize them from participating in the elections at all?
Each question becomes more interesting than the previous one. I am privy to the fact that 2011, I was the corps commander when the Panchayat elections took place. We had 80-81% turnout in many places at that time. Almost 30 panchas and sarpanchas were killed, subsequently assassinated, killed in the subsequent years. But despite that, we have continued. We have continued with democratic norms in Kashmir. We have also had situations where people from the army, Jackali personnel, local personnel who are part of the army, have been targeted. Jammu and Kashmir police, their personnel have been targeted. So the local Kashmiri will continue to get targeted. There's no doubt about it. But the Kashmiri is brave, and in these situations, political parties do have the will. They have that kind of steel nerves to be able to, resist this kind of a thing. And very importantly, when you go after the terrorists, it's not just the terrorists. You have to go after the networks. When you go after the networks and you take out the overground workers and you target the separatists and neutralize them completely, then the capability to do all this business of what is really a hanky-panky, to be able to put the state on the back foot, all this cannot then take place easily. Now, that's exactly what is happening at the moment with the drone attacks, although your questions will come subsequently on that. But I may just draw this context here that people were worried that Pakistan is not in a position to be able to do anything great, take any great initiatives at the moment. There is peace on the line of control at the moment. The strength of terrorists is very low. The recruitment processes is absolutely down at the moment. Something has to be done to bring about relevance. Because in this whole game of terror, in the whole game of hybrid warfare, remaining relevant is very important. And therefore, this relevance is being sought through attacks such as the drone attacks, which are taking place now.
Yes, sir. So, in your remarks, you also talked about this Article 370, but the refrain and the clamor has been from the political leadership. In fact, I'm talking about the political leadership in the state, has been the restoration of Article 370 itself. Do you think this sort of a demand is going to kind of diminish the gains that we have made in the state in the last 2 years in terms of peace and stability that we have achieved? Is it an emotive issue in the state? What is your opinion, since you have served there? You know the Awam too closely. You have gauged their responses to issues. So I believe you will be able to give us an idea of what is the sentiment out there.
See, Bipinder Sahab, as much as I am in touch with a lot of people from Kashmir, through social media, through direct contact. I visit Kashmir since I am the Chancellor of the Central University. I also go there and meet some younger people, the faculty and things like that. I am reasonably privy to what is the broad narrative which is going on. Equally, as I am doing this, I'm sure all the political parties in Jammu and Kashmir are similarly doing this, and also similarly gauging the response in the rest of India. It's important for them to know how is the rest of India looking at this whole business. I think, to my mind, the demand which today is being made by some of the mainstream parties for restoration of Article 370 and 35A is what I call a maximalist demand. It is done for a diplomatic purpose, for the purpose of a maneuver. This is to a maximalist demand for which we will settle for something lower, which will in this case be ultimately statehood. And that is what is they are going to be satisfied with. I give a lot of credit to the government of India that they actually took away statehood from Jammu and Kashmir and made it a union territory. Because if you ask me, that was a very, very smart act. That would make sure that this whole issue of Article 370 would actually recede to the background, which is what is exactly going to happen in the future.
Yeah, basically, yes, absolutely. What you are stating is right in the sense that, I believe the statehood demand would be the low-hanging fruit that can be achieved by both the sides, and it could be a sort of acceptable solution to the whole issue in Jammu and Kashmir, and precisely probably why the government did not keep the statehood as one of the agenda items in the discussion that the Prime Minister had this time. So maybe that will be discussed at a later stage.
Absolutely.
It is also true that for all this process to move forward, elections need to be conducted as quickly as possible, as early as possible. Of course, delimitation process is happening currently. It could take a little while before this happens. Do you think, suppose say the government decides to hold elections today, do you think the security situation in Jammu and Kashmir is conducive? You did mention briefly about the normalcy that is being achieved, or we are inching towards in your opening remarks. If you could just elaborate on that, and what is your assessment, whether is it conducive or not for an election to happen at this point in time?
You see, the DDC elections were conducted and conducted quite comfortably without any major rancor here and there. Maybe a little spurts of violence maybe in some places. That gave me a lot of encouragement that assembly elections can equally be conducted. The issue is how prepared is the should I say the polity of Kashmir for that. There's an element of confusion at the moment. First of all, the mainstream parties are not fully convinced should they be participating. They said, okay, local elections, DDCs, which are bread and butter elections, we will participate in them. They could sort of, on that argument, they could easily participate in them. But if it comes to assembly elections, so far we are not very certain. Even the parties themselves have not yet taken a full stance on this to say that are they going to participate in assembly elections. As I said, time is a great healer. There will be more meetings now that the Prime Minister has initiated this whole thing. There will be more meetings. There will be more give and take, a little bit of a compromise here and there, and that will facilitate the delimitation issue. No one has objected to, right? This is constitutional. It has taken place in 1963, 1975, 1995. So no one can deny that it is necessary now based on the latest census figures. Latest census figures in this case are 2011 figures, right? So no one is objecting to that. Ultimately, it's a question of how quickly can this delimitation be done. And you've got Dr. Farooq Abdullah as a member of the Delimitation Commission himself. So I'm sure that this process, the cooperation will be quite fast. It will ensure that this whole thing is facilitated. We can look towards elections sometime in the early part of next year, middle of next year. By that time, I'm quite certain the pandemic would have abated to some extent. The international order would be looking at the post-Afghanistan situation. I do believe there will be an element of confusion and chaos in Afghanistan at that time. For possible civil war-like conditions, Pakistan would be deeply involved there. Its ability to do much in Jammu and Kashmir will be questionable at that time, and therefore I think assembly elections will be conducted and can be conducted, and that will really open up. It will open up the process and the narratives that we are going to be looking at in the future. One of the very important aspects that the Prime Minister referred to was the slogan which he gave, Dil ki Duri and Dilli ki Duri. I thought this Dil ki Duri is a very important part. That is what my whole doctrine was when I was working there as a corps commander. The whole aspect of the hearts doctrine, Dil ki Duri, hearts doctrine. This is what we were all working on. It's not me. The army has always been working on it. This aspect of Dilli ki Duri. I'm glad the Prime Minister has introduced this issue, because at the end of the day, you have to remember that in this whole game, Delhi and Srinagar or Delhi and Jammu have to be in sync with each other. You can't have two different narratives being played out or no narratives being played out at all, which is what, the thing was the entire situation was left in a drift in the earlier years. That unfortunately should not happen, and I think the Prime Minister is absolutely on the right lines when he's talking about this whole aspect of Dilli ki Duri.
Yes. So you did mention about Afghanistan situation that is emerging, the US withdrawing from Afghanistan by September 11, which is the anniversary of the Twin Tower attacks in New York, and how Pakistan is now kind of focusing on Afghanistan because it has a lot of interest there, and the emerging situation could throw up challenges for Pakistan in terms of a force inimical to Pakistan emerging as the most powerful force in Afghanistan itself. So obviously this February ceasefire, adhering to the ceasefire agreement of 2003 has come in handy for Pakistan to ease the situation on the line of control, and then focusing on its northern border. Do you think this is likely to go on for a longer while than expected by Pakistan itself, so that the situation might emerge as a better situation in Kashmir in the times to come because of this factor of Pakistan not being too focused on the line of control at this point in time?
You see, Pakistan would never seek stability and peace and tranquility on the line of control unless it had some dividend to gain from it. Obviously, the major dividend was that it can now pay attention to the internal security of Pakistan, which is also a very important factor here, and Afghanistan itself. Depending on the outcome of what happens in Afghanistan, if there's a civil war conditions or what kind of things emerges, you are going to find the impact will also be internally on Pakistan. And remember, I would like to remind your viewership that at the height of the internal security problems of Pakistan, at one time, 1/3 of the Pakistan Army's brigades were deployed on internal security. 66 brigades, 22 of them were deployed on internal security. They don't want that kind of a situation. And they're not sure how exactly the situation in Afghanistan is going to pan out. This is actually calls for a full discussion on Afghanistan, because I am of the belief that the situation will be in flux for fairly long. Unlike 1990-91, when the Soviets had withdrawn, the Russians at that time, the Soviets had withdrawn, this time you got a very strong Afghan National Army, almost 2 lakhs, 1,75,000 strong. So we've got a fairly strong Afghan National Police. The Americans are seeking facilities in the region from Pakistan, etc. I don't know what ultimately they will get. They're also looking at possibility of some air bases, etc., from where they can support the forces against the Taliban, because they don't really have an agreement with the Taliban at the end of the day, even while they are withdrawing. It's not certain that the Taliban is going to run amok completely. They are in control of only 50 districts out of the 320 districts at the moment. So the situation is in flux. It's not as if the civil war conditions are going to immediately create a Talibanized Afghanistan completely, and everything will be to Pakistan's liking. So Pakistan is likely to be embroiled in Afghanistan for fairly long to try and make sure that the situation is compatible to its interests. This is the window. This is the window we should be seeking and we should be exploiting.
Yes. So we did discuss about the drone attack that happened on the Jammu Air Base just a couple of days ago. How do you read this attack? It's being described as the first ever drone-based terror strike that has happened on an Indian installation, whether it is military or civilian. Of course, this is a military installation on which this attack has happened. And, considering that this threat was something that was visible to the Indian Armed Forces for a very long time, how could have this attack happened? And in the larger context of the drone warfare itself, how do you read this situation at this point in time?
See, Bipendra Saab, in the whole field of proxy war, in the whole field of terrorism, being surprised should never surprise you or surprise me, because in this world of terrorism, the terrorist leader will always seek innovative ways of trying to outmaneuver you, right? You are unfortunately on the defensive, because he's the one who's taking the initiatives all the time. So to get past you first time, second time is possible. You have to make sure it doesn't get past you the third time and the fourth time. This is what you have to make sure. No, we had the indicators. For the last 3 years. We've been seeing developments in Punjab. In the Jammu border itself, we have been seeing transportation of stores, etc., logistics, which have been taking place in certain areas. So you have found AK-47s and ammunition and grenades being delivered by drones. Obviously, all this was an experimentation going on, right? Now, suddenly they've been able to place explosives, IEDs. They've probably been able to get some kind of a technology by which the release system is there, by which you can release a IED onto a target. How accurately is it done? Is it by line of sight, or can it be done through a GPS kind of a board? All this is at the moment under investigation, and the NIA will, I'm sure, go very deep into this to find it out. They have taken inspiration also the fact that Pakistani terrorists or proxy terrorists here are generally what are called copycat terrorists. They will copy something which has happened around the world. Now, I think the greatest inspiration is the Aramco refinery attack, which took place with 6 drones. It was 6 drones and 11 missiles together, which is how it brought the biggest refineries. It brought it down to its knees completely, right? So this is the kind of thing they were seeking. Fortunately, we didn't see a swarm attack right in the beginning of it all, but the swarm attack can be expected also. What is the question at the moment is, did it come from across the border or did it come from within? Well, people have got different opinions, and I am on both sides of the divide at the moment. But I do tend to veer towards the fact that yesterday, when the reports came that firing took place on these drones in the Kaluchak area, and then they immediately vanished, it seems that there is a local content, that there's a local command and control. Now, they have been launched locally, and someone has got visual control over them, and therefore, hearing the sounds of the firing, etc., he's managed to take it out. Someone sitting in Pakistan and doing it won't be able to do it so easily. Someone sitting in Florida and controlling the drones in Afghanistan obviously would not have that kind of a immediate response capability. So that lends me to the belief that these are most likely launched locally. 3, 4, 5, 6 kilometers. That is the capability they would probably have. Very low trajectory, very low flight path. And because of the low flight path, the radars don't have the capability to pick up these, and the sizes of the drones itself being smaller, the moment you enlarge the size of the drone, the radars will start picking up. But if you have very small drones, obviously you will require very powerful radars. And then the ranges will get very restricted comparatively. So keeping all these aspects in mind, to my mind, this event which has happened at the Jammu Air Base, Air Force technical area, was a technology demonstrator. It was a demonstrator to test, check. And other events which are following are similar, but they have not been able to sort of penetrate and do something substantial. It's a matter of time that something will happen, because with this kind of technology, the objectives and targets open up in hundreds. It can be line of control, it can be a headquarter near the line of control, it can be a gun area, it can be an ammunition dump, it can be any kind of a thing. It can be a radar installation of an airport, it can be an ATC of an airport, anything can happen. So this is on the border. If it is inside the rest of India, it can take place in any city, in any place like this. And terrorists don't have any qualms about the kind of target they use. They find. So this is an important event, which is a demonstration. Put us on the defensive, make waves, air waves, make media waves, show the relevance of the terrorists and the controllers on the other side, that they're still relevant to the situation, despite what the Indian political authorities and the security authorities may say that the situation is well under control. But out of the blue comes an event like this, which tends to start casting aspersions on what is the so-called normalcy in this area. Where I'm very happy with the action taken by the government of India is the speed with which we have gone to the United Nations and informed the world, informed the General Assembly, because I think it's an important aspect that there needs to be a collective responsibility for fighting this worldwide. Otherwise, drones can just go amok. They can create tremendous problems for everyone around the world.
Absolutely, sir. It's the kind of serious threat that this poses. It can be gauged from the fact that these kind of cheap drones are available off the shelf on e-commerce sites, and people can take a leaf out of this book and start using it. And also the cost involved in defending ourselves from these kind of threats is quite huge. We'll be investing a lot of money to defend ourselves, whereas it is a cheaper option for the terror groups or anybody who wants to damage India's security to use it and then go scot-free if they need be. So that's the kind of threat this poses. In that circumstances, I just want to understand, because the Lashkar-e-Taibah's role in this attack is being talked about. That is the kind of first impressions and the indication that have come in. Considering that it's a Pakistan-supported terror outfit, should India look at it as an act of war, or should we dismiss it as just terror attack and then do our investigations and get away with it, get done with it? Because after Uri and what we did after Pulwama and the Uri attacks, so should there be maybe a response which is much more than just an adequate response in this matter? Is it an act of war? What is your opinion on this?
This is a very interesting question, and there will be many opinions on this. But let me start by saying that proof at the moment is a awkward thing. We don't really have it because we ourselves are debating whether this could have come from across the line of or from across the IB, or could it have been someone homegrown, something from within the built-up areas of Jammu around there, etc. So this is all nebulous at the moment, and the NIA investigation will throw up something definitely in the due course of time. We are also looking at normalizing the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, right? So at this time, perhaps to up the ante and call it an act of war, etc., will also put the pressure on the political establishment and the security establishment. The moment you start using high-flying language and words of this kind, you start imposing pressure on yourself. I think the approach which has been followed, taking it internationally to the United Nations, apprising the world about it, making them partners to this entire thing, saying India will take the lead in this, etc. After all, the United Nations has not been able to give a definition to the term terrorism till now. I hope you are aware that we have not been able to define terrorism till now. And therefore, we are putting the pressure on the United Nations. Very good. I think this is excellent foreign policy, working it out. But internally within Kashmir, I think the situation being reasonably well under control, the whole purpose of whoever is playing this game out is to try and up this ante. We need not get provoked. We have not suffered casualties. As I said, it's been a demonstration. Now, if it goes beyond, and therefore our warnings should be very, very strong. Besides the warnings, I think we should be very clear that our technology, our drone technology should not just be counter-drone, but it should be entirely offensive in nature. That we should be able to hit and target anything across the line of across the IB or the line of control, on terrorist facilities, on Pakistan Army facilities, or anything like that. We should have no qualms about it. In fact, the first response, which I wrote an article on Sunday itself, this is the first thing I said. The offensive content of our response must be absolutely clear, because we should not go wrong with that. The moment we pussyfoot this and start being defensive on it, I think the other side will start taking advantage of it and maneuvering for more space. This is something we should guard against.
Thank you, sir. I think that is a wise recommendation that you have given to the government. I appreciate that very much, and I want to thank you for your time and for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, and thank you for accepting my invitation every time that I ask you to be on my program or on a show or to write an article for me. Thank you so much for that. And
pleasure is entirely mine. The pleasure is entirely mine. And let me tell you, I get tempted to come to your program because I know the questions are going to be very incisive and very searching.
So thank you so much. I thank you for this compliment. We'll end the program here. Thank you so much.